Check out this shirt. Pretty cool, eh? Friends of mine gave me that. Alright, so I built this board last winter and I shot a ton of footage and I did a whole series about that. So if you're interested, check out that whole video series. What this video is going to be about is I figured I got all this video shot. I had a little bit of spare time. I figured, hey, why not consolidate it all into one video? So for some of you who are interested, you can see what it takes to do a board from start to finish. I apologize if this video is just a little long because it is a lot of material, a lot of time went into making a surfboard or making this surfboard. So I had a hard time kind of trying to figure out how to edit it down and leaving in the most important points. But hey, I think I did an okay job. So that's what this video is going to be about. Just a couple quick items about this board. I've ridden it a few times. I haven't had it out a ton because when the surf is really good, I generally take out my retro single fin. I just like the way that rides. What I do like about this board, it's got a fuller shape. It's kind of the egg shape. It catches waves no problem. It's nice and thick. It's got full rails, which also makes it a little hard to bury the rail. I put this as a tri-fin configuration too, which makes it pretty good for turning. But again, because the rails are a little bit more chunky, a little bit bigger with a little more float, you can't really bury the rail as easy with this. So this is a really great board when the waves are a little bit mushy, a little more whitewash, when it's not really clean, when it's windy. But I really do like this board. I just haven't had a chance to ride it as much this year. So this video will be a consolidation of all the footage that I shot for this. Also, if you're interested in making a surfboard, I have 2 video series on how to do that. This one and also for my retro single fin that I did quite a few years ago. You can find that on my channel as well. Also, this winter, I probably am going to start a new board. My idea is to probably make a chambered wooden surfboard, probably something small, maybe like maybe a hybrid, like a groveler type of thing. Just something that's not too big because my woodworking skills aren't the best. So, you know, it'll be a nice new challenge. I've been mostly making XPS and EPS surfboards. So I figured, hey, wood might be something to play with and might be a good challenge. So let's get to the montage for this. Also, I've added some commentary where I thought it was important to add. Not too much. The video's kind of long because I had a hard time figuring what to cut out and what to leave in, so it's around about a half hour long in total, but I think it's pretty good. So let's get to showing you how this board was made. So this stuff here is foam you get at Home Depot. This is XPS foam that is used for construction. So it's basically usually pink or blue. I got the pink stuff, has pink panther on it. What I'm doing here is I'm just roughing up the surface so I can glue 2 pieces together. Spritz a little water on it, and then use this polyurethane glue that's activated by the water. The glue will start foaming up and it'll fill voids and just, it's really great for gluing this foam together, I found. So here I'm going to clamp the edges with a load of clamps and some wood just to even out the pressure. And then I'm going to use some ratchet straps to really clamp down on all the foam. As you can see what I've done here with the middle piece of 2x4 just to hold it all together. Now I'm just going to square up the blank using my hot wire. I cut the blank in half. Here I'm just making a stringer. I'm going to glue the stringer between the 2 blocks of foam that were cut. Once one side is dry or cured, I clamp the other side onto it as well. Here I'm preparing the blank for hot wiring. So I've clamped 2 stringers, wooden stringers on either side, and then now I run my hot wire so that way I can get a nice, smooth, even cut. This removes the bulk of the foam, which really saves me a lot of time. So this is the rough kind of like blank that you would normally buy. So now I'm just going to trace out an outline. You can find templates for various shapes of boards, or you can create your own. I just happen to like one of my older boards, so I thought I'd replicate it. There's also a site I use called blendingcurves.com, where there are loads of templates for all kinds of different surfboards. You can even get a custom template made if you like. I'll put a link in the description too. Here I'm just making a template so that I can save it for later, and I also use it to cut out the opposite side of the board. Now I'm going to square everything up. I'm going to even out the blank. The squarer you make the blank at this stage, the better your board will come out. Now I'm going to mark my rail bands. You can figure out how to do this by checking out one of my other videos. I don't have time to explain the whole process here, but you kind of get the idea. You can also check out Greenlight Surf Supply on how to do rail bands as well. They have a really good description on how to do it. I'm using a sanding block, but I also have this thing here, which is a Surfoam rasp, and it's made by Stanley, and it has like this raspy type of blade on it, and it works really well. Now I'm just starting to blend all the curves together. I'm going to do glass-on fins on this board. I'm just going to shape the fins using an angle grinder and a sanding disc. So I'm going to foil these fins. This takes a bit of time. It might be easier just to buy them, but hey, I thought it'd be cool to make my own fins. Now I'm going to start the lamination process. I'm going to do what's called a cut lap. So I'm going to tape so that way no fiberglass and epoxy can get on the inside part of the board when I do my laps. So on the bottom, I'm using a glassing schedule of 6-ounce cloth. Here I'm making some relief cuts for around the bends, the corners, the curves. You probably want a relief cut anywhere where there's a sharp bend. So I've mixed up some epoxy, and now I'm going to start laminating. I want to saturate the cloth, the fiberglass cloth, really well. Saturate all the way around the rails. Let it soak in real nice. And then I start tucking the rail. You notice I have a pair of scissors here. I find it really good to cut off any loose strands of fiberglass. So once some time has passed and the epoxy has cured, I cut the fiberglass to remove the tape and the excess fiberglass, so I get a really nice clean fiberglass line. And this is what's called a cut lap. I sand all the spots where I had the overlapping fiberglass for the relief cuts. I like using a vacuum cleaner at the same time too. Keeps the dust down. Now I'm going to tape the bottom of the board and again do another cut lap when I'm laminating the deck. So I'm going to do a layer of 6 ounce on the deck first, and then I'm going to put another layer on top, which you'll see here in a second. This is 4 ounce cloth. Always put the lighter cloth on top of the heavier cloth because the weave is slightly smaller and it just makes it a little cleaner when you're laminating. Here I'm mixing up the epoxy. I like using resin research. Stuff I find is very clear and it stays clear, has really good UV protection. Also, you notice I pour out all the epoxy at once. That's to make sure that the epoxy doesn't kick off too quickly, because if you leave it in the container, it will start to overheat, and I think it's something called exotherm, and it will harden very quickly and also can even catch fire. So again, do the same thing as I did on the bottom. I do the same on the deck, and the deck of course will use more epoxy because it's got 2 layers of cloth. After a few hours, once the epoxy has tacked up, I use an X-Acto knife and I remove the tape on the bottom. Again, this is called a cut lap. And now I clean up that cut lap using a sander, again using a vacuum to keep the dust down. Here I'm setting the fins. So I'm going to do glass-on fins, and I like using a little bit of hot glue just to hold the fins in place. If you do fin boxes, then of course that will be done in a different way, but you can check that out in one of my other videos. I cut out a bunch of pieces of fiberglass that matches the shape of a fin. I use a little bit of fiberglass rope here to reinforce the gussets along the fin. And then I laminate some fiberglass onto each one of the fins. So I sandwich it on either side. Then once it's hardened up, I remove the excess. Here I'm just using a pair of scissors, and then I'm going to use a sander just to smooth it all out, make it look pretty. On the tight radius, I use a Dremel with a little sanding drum. Now it's time to do the hot coat. So I'm going to hot coat the deck first. I'm going to use some good quality 3M masking tape and mask off around the middle part of the board, so I get a nice line. So that way I don't have like big beads of epoxy that I'll have to sand off. I mix up a batch of epoxy, and then I use a nice bristle brush and just hot coat it. It's best to use long, even strokes. Alright, once it's set up, I remove the tape, sand off any excess. And then I flip the board, and of course I tape along just below where the epoxy line was, tape line was from when I hot coated the deck. I create a little bit of a dam here at the back so I can get a nice line when I sand the edge here. So again, I hot coat the bottom, and back here I add a little extra epoxy so it creates this dam of epoxy, so I get a nice square rail at the back when I go to sand once I remove the tape. I forgot to mention, I also always add additive F, which is an additive to epoxy that works really well. It helps prevent fish eyes, and it helps the epoxy to level out. So now I'm going to start the sanding process. This is my least favorite part of building a surfboard, but it'll give you the best results if you make sure to take your time. I'm just using a random orbital sander, but you could totally use a palm sander. I also use a professional grade polisher with a sanding pad, but I don't like using it that much because it kicks up so much dust, but it's incredibly quick if you can use it properly. But I figured I'd rather take a little extra time and create less dust by using a random orbital sander. The pros can sand a board probably in 5 minutes, whereas this is going to take me the better part of an hour. I'm going to sand the rails by hand. Back here I'm going to take particular attention to make sure to get it nice and square. I sand all of the fins. Here you can see I've switched to a palm sander. At this point you're going to get some sand throughs, but that's okay because we're going to do another coat, a gloss coat. Okay, now I'm installing the leash plug. I drill a hole and then router it out. Mix up some epoxy with a thickener agent. And then install the leash plug. Once dry, I use my sander and I just clean it up a bit. Now, ideally, you could also do this at the end during the gloss coat. Now, I'm going to paint the hot coat. This isn't normally how it's done, but I'm doing it this way because my boards doesn't look that nice because I use this pink foam, and you can't really paint the foam directly. It doesn't adhere very well to XPS foam. This isn't necessarily the right way to do it, but I've had pretty good results doing it this way. And then once I'm done painting it, I give it a good cleaning with some soap and water dish detergent to remove any oil that's left over from the paint or my hands. I like adding my little logo. And then I'm gonna hot coat the whole thing. So again, I'm gonna tape off the board in the middle. mix up some epoxy and then hot coat it using a nice soft bristle brush. Remove the tape once it's set. Flip the board, tape it again. Create the dam at the back so the epoxy can accumulate to get a nice sharp line for the rail. And hot coat again. Once it's cured, pull the tape. You can see there I get a nice edge. Okay, now we gotta clean it up, so we're gonna sand it again. So we're gonna sand the rail to get rid of that epoxy line where we did the tape line. I'm gonna make nice sharp rail at the back called a hard rail where water will release. And now I'm going to wet sand the whole board because it was fairly smooth. If it wasn't very smooth, hit it with some coarse sandpaper, maybe 220, 180, just to smooth it right out. But I'm just going to wet sand it because the board was already pretty good. So I'm just going to wet sand all the way from 320 all the way up to about 1,000. So this will take a while.
Take my hand, and we don't need to do the things we don't want to do.
Once the sanding's done, to make the board shine again, you got to hit it with some automotive clear coat polish, and that'll make the board all shiny again. I'm not gonna go crazy shiny. I personally prefer more like a satin finish anyway. Now I wipe down the board and then I'm gonna do a pinstripe just to kind of hide my my lap line there between the two colors. I thought it would look cool, look nice to put a pinstripe there. Alright, and here is the finished board. And let's call this board done, and let's take it surfing. So if you've stuck with me this whole time and watched this whole video, thanks so much. Give it a thumbs up if you like this video. I post videos on all kinds of things, but in particular, I have a real passion for surfing, so my channel is heavily focused on surf videos. So I really appreciate you watching, and consider subscribing to my channel. And at the end here, I'll put some gratuitous surf video of me riding the board very poorly. Alright, until the next time, thanks for watching.